Imagine this. You are standing on an open plain. The wind is sharp, the grassland stretches forever, and across the horizon you see horsemen, hundreds of them. Their bows are already raised, their eyes are locked on you. You take a breath, clench your fists, maybe even think about running. But the truth is simple. You would not last seconds against them, because these are not just horsemen. They are Mongol warriors, forged in one of the harshest environments on Earth and trained from childhood to fight, ride, and kill without hesitation. Hollywood might show you cavalry charges or dramatic duels. The reality was far more terrifying. Mongol warriors turned the steppe into a weapon. They did not just fight battles, they erased armies. And here is why this story matters. It shows what relentless training, ruthless strategy, and total discipline can create. And it reminds us how much more brutal reality was than the myths we see in movies and games. By the end, you will understand why, against a Mongol warrior, you would never have a chance. The making of a Mongol warrior began almost as soon as a child could walk. At the age of 3, boys were placed on horseback. Riding became as natural as breathing. By the time they were 5, they could shoot arrows at targets while galloping across uneven ground. Archaeologists have found child-sized composite bows that prove this was not myth, but daily practice. Life on the steppe was unforgiving. Winters plunged below freezing. Summers scorched the plains, and families depended entirely on their herds. Children learned to herd animals, hunt for food, and fight off raiders. Survival meant training every single day. A Persian chronicler once wrote that Mongol children grow up in the saddle and learn to draw the bow before they can speak clearly. That was no exaggeration. It was daily life. While knights in Europe trained as squires under noble households, and samurai in Japan studied poetry alongside swordplay, Mongol children lived their training. The steppe itself was their classroom, and every chore or journey was preparation for war. By the time they reached adulthood, they were already hardened soldiers, not merely apprentices. The true heart of Mongol warfare was not the sword, but the composite bow. Crafted from wood, horn, and sinew, it was small enough for horseback, yet powerful enough to pierce armor at distances of more than 200 yards. Surviving bows revealed draw weights between 100 and 160 pounds. That kind of pull required immense strength, and Mongol warriors mastered it from youth. What made the bow terrifying was not only its power, but the accuracy of the men who used it. Mongols could shoot forward, sideways, and even backward while riding at full speed. Imagine charging an enemy only to be struck by arrows from a rider who appeared to be retreating. This ability turned battles into one-sided hunts. European knights trusted their longswords and heavy lances. Samurai revered the katana. Both were deadly up close, but against the Mongol bow they were useless until you could close the distance. Most never did. In 1241 at the Battle of Mohi, Hungarian knights in full armor fell by the thousands before they even reached combat. Chroniclers wrote that the sky grew dark under the storm of arrows. Even the famed English longbow could not match the mobility of the Mongol weapon. Longbowmen needed to plant their feet while Mongols fired from saddles that never stopped moving. The bow was not simply a tool, it was the engine of the empire. Mongol warriors wore light armor, often leather or lamella plates laced with rawhide. It was enough to protect against arrows and lighter strikes, but light enough to keep them mobile. Heavy plate like that worn by knights slowed movement. The Mongols refused to sacrifice speed, their arsenal extended beyond bows. Curved sabers for slashing, lances for charges, daggers and maces for brutal close combat. Some even carried lassos, pulling enemy riders from their saddles. They adapted to any fight, whether at range or up close. Endurance, however, was their deadliest asset. These men could ride for days without stopping. They carried dried meat, drank fermented mare's milk, and in dire moments even cut a vein in their horse's neck to drink its blood. That practice sounds shocking today, but it kept both rider and horse alive and moving. Unlike European armies that depended on supply wagons or samurai who relied on rice provisions, the Mongols carried their resources with them. Their steppe ponies, small but incredibly tough, could gallop long distances and graze as they went. Chroniclers often describe Mongol armies as phantoms, appearing and disappearing before anyone could react. Against such endurance, no heavily armoured army could compete. If skill with the bow made the Mongols dangerous, their strategies made them nearly unbeatable. One of their most infamous tactics was the feigned retreat. A unit would break ranks and appear to flee in panic. Overconfident enemies would pursue, abandoning formation. Then hidden cavalry swept back around, surrounding and annihilating them. European knights trained to charge directly fell for this trap again and again. Encirclement was another hallmark. Entire towns or armies were surrounded, with arrows raining down until defenders collapsed. Those who resisted often faced complete destruction. Stories of these massacres spread quickly, convincing other cities to surrender without a fight. At Legnitz in 1241, Polish knights charged confidently into what they thought was victory. The Mongols lured them in, flanked them, and slaughtered them. Chroniclers described fields covered with corpses and broken banners fluttering in silence. Even in sieges they excelled. Captured engineers from China and Persia built catapults and trebuchets. Fire arrows set wooden defences alight. Sometimes smoke was used to blind defenders. Cities often surrendered in terror before their walls had even been breached. Strategy turned Mongols into more than warriors. They were tacticians of fear. Fear was not a byproduct of Mongol warfare. It was a deliberate weapon. Entire towns surrendered after hearing reports of what had happened elsewhere. Survivors from destroyed cities carried horror stories that grew with each telling. By the time Mongols reached their next target, defenders were already broken in spirit. Some accounts describe prisoners forced to march at the front of Mongol forces as human shields. Others tell of executions staged in front of city walls to terrify onlookers. Whether every detail was true or exaggerated hardly mattered. The psychological effect was devastating. An Arab historian summed it up starkly. They came, they slaughtered, they burned, and they left silence behind them. That silence became their reputation, spreading far beyond their borders. Where knights fought for chivalry and samurai for honor, Mongols fought for victory, and fear was as useful to them as the arrow or the saber. In many campaigns, battles were won before the first shot was fired. Their record of conquest speaks for itself. In 1241 at Mohi, Mongol cavalry crushed the Hungarian army in a single day. European Christendom reeled in shock, fearing the steppe horsemen would ride all the way to the Atlantic. In 1258, they captured Baghdad, then one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Chroniclers claim the Tigris River ran black with ink from destroyed libraries and red with the blood of scholars and citizens. The fall of Baghdad was not just a military defeat, it was the collapse of a cultural capital. Against the Khwarezm Empire, their campaign was so swift it became legend. Within 2 years, the empire was erased, cities burned, rulers executed, populations scattered. Even mighty China fell, first the Jin dynasty, then the Song. Decades of Mongol pressure toppled one of the most advanced civilizations of the medieval world. By the close of the 13th century, the Mongol Empire stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe. It was the largest contiguous empire in human history, built one arrow storm at a time. These victories were not flukes. They were the result of discipline, training, and calculated terror. For their enemies, defeat was not only likely, it was inevitable. So how does all this compare with the battles we see on screen? Movies show noble duels fought under the moonlight. Reality was clouds of arrows blotting out the sun before you even saw the enemy's faces. Movies show heavy knights dominating the battlefield. Reality shows them collapsing under the speed and precision of lighter horsemen. Movies show warriors chasing glory. Reality shows Mongols pursuing victory with ruthless strategy and cold efficiency. The difference matters. Real warfare was not about cinematic beauty, it was about survival, endurance, and fear. The Mongol warrior was not simply a man with a weapon, he was part of a system that fused environment, training, and terror into the deadliest force of its time. That is what Hollywood does not show you. Mongol warriors were not fantasy. They were real men shaped by a brutal land, trained from childhood and unleashed across continents. So the next time you picture knights clashing in armor or samurai dueling in silence, remember this. The Mongols were different. They did not just fight battles, they ended them before they began.